Zane Ellis hadn't planned on chasing a crying little girl through Central Park that morning, but plans didn't mean much when you were a single dad trying to keep your own kid from eating dirt and your coffee from spilling. Hey! Zane jogged to catch up to the little one darting between benches and tourists. Are you lost? The girl slowed, wide brown eyes filled with tears. Her curls were a mess, cheeks flushed red, and her tiny pink sneakers were half untied. She couldn't have been older than 5. I can't find Mommy, she hiccuped. Zane knelt in front of her, his voice soft. Okay. That's all right. We'll find her. What's your name? Penny, she whispered, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her jacket. Hi, Penny. I'm Zane. He offered a reassuring smile. My son Parker is just over there with his babysitter. Want to wait with us while we look for your mom? Penny looked over to where Parker, a round-faced 4-year-old with a baseball cap too big for his head, was playing with blocks on a blanket. She nodded slowly. Zane held out his hand. You're safe, okay? I promise. They walked back to the blanket, and Parker immediately looked up. Who's that? This is Penny, Zane said. She's kinda awesome. I lost my mommy, Penny said seriously, sitting down beside him. Don't worry. My dad finds everything, Parker nodded like it was common knowledge. Zane chuckled, pulling out his phone. Let's get the police involved, yeah. They'll help. 20 minutes later, after speaking to a nearby patrol officer, Zane got a call from dispatch. The mother's headed your way. She's been searching the park for the last hour. He glanced down at Penny, who was now drawing stick figures with Parker in the dirt. Tell her we're near the fountain. We'll wait here. He was still crouching beside the kids when a pair of designer black heels stopped inches from his hand. Oh my God, a breathless voice said. Penny. Zane looked up and blinked. The woman standing in front of him didn't look like any frantic mother he'd ever seen. She looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, long dark hair twisted into a sleek ponytail, tailored navy blazer, and fierce almond-shaped eyes set in a face that looked way too composed for someone who'd just lost her child. But the second Penny threw herself into her arms, the woman dropped to her knees, hugging her tight, kissing her forehead. I'm so sorry, baby. I turned around for 1 second and you were gone. I was scared, Penny mumbled into her shoulder. I know. She pulled back, checking her over. Are you hurt? No, Penny turned and pointed. That's Zane. He helped me. The woman lifted her eyes to his, and Zane stood, brushing dirt off his jeans. Hi, he said, offering his hand. She was with me and my son. We just stayed put and called it in. She took his hand, warm and firm. Thank you. Seriously. I don't even have words. I'm just glad she's okay. I'm Olivia Jordan, she said quickly. I can't tell you how grateful I am. I was going out of my mind. Zane nodded. I get it. I've got a 4-year-old. They move fast. Penny was still holding on to her leg, and Parker came over to stand beside Zane, tugging his sleeve. Can she come to our playdate? Zane blinked. Olivia laughed short, surprised. I think Penny would love that. Maybe we can exchange numbers? Zane hesitated. She seemed polished. Out of his league, honestly. But she was a mom. And he'd seen the panic in her eyes when she hugged her daughter. That was real. Sure, he said. We're usually at the park most mornings. It started with casual hellos. Then coffee on the bench while the kids played. Then real conversations. Zane learned Olivia ran a company. Something to do with tech investment. She never bragged, but it was clear she was important. Her schedule was brutal, but she always made time for Penny. He never asked about the father. She never asked about Parker's mom. Some silences were mutual. One Friday morning, Zane showed up with 2 coffees and a bag of fresh muffins. Olivia blinked in surprise. "You brought me breakfast? Figured you could use it. You had that board meeting yesterday, right?" She tilted her head. "You remembered? Kind of hard to forget when you were pacing in heels and muttering about quarterly projections." She laughed, biting into the muffin. "You make excellent muffins." "I buy excellent muffins," Zane grinned, sitting beside her on the bench. The kids were building a sandcastle in the sandbox, arguing over whether it needed a moat. "You're good with her," Olivia said suddenly. "Penny. She keeps asking when we're seeing you again. She's a great kid." Zane looked at her. "You're doing a good job." Her eyes softened, and she looked away. "That means more than you know." The next week, it rained. Hard. Olivia texted no, called. "Do you and Parker want to come over? I've got hot cocoa and way too many Legos." Zane hesitated. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Her apartment was not an apartment. It was a penthouse. The elevator opened directly into a sleek, modern living room with floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the skyline, and furniture that probably cost more than his truck. Zane tried not to stare. "Whoa," Parker whispered, clutching his dad's hand. "Yeah, buddy," Zane said under his breath. "Whoa." Olivia came out of the kitchen, barefoot, in leggings and a soft sweater. "Ignore the view. Come in." Penny ran forward and dragged Parker toward the playroom. Olivia smiled. "Can I offer you scotch, wine, or cocoa?" Zane blinked. Cocoa. I'm driving. And parenting." She handed him a mug with marshmallows and sat beside him on the couch. For a moment, they just watched the rain streak down the glass. "So," he said, "you never told me just how big your company is. I didn't want to scare you off." He turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Scare me? I'm not just a CEO. I built the company. We hit valuation past $1 billion last year." Zane stared at her. "You're a billionaire?" She nodded, waiting. He laughed. "And here I was trying to impress you with muffins." A beat of silence. Then Olivia leaned in, her voice low. "You did. The muffins worked." Something shifted in the air between them. And Zane, who hadn't let someone into his life in years, found himself wanting more than just playdates. He wanted to know her. All of her. And he had no idea that she was starting to feel the exact same way. Zane hadn't expected to be back in her penthouse so soon, but 2 days later, they were sitting at her dining table, surrounded by glitter glue, popsicle sticks, and what looked like the skeletal remains of a failed paper crown. "You sure this is safe?" he asked, eyeing Parker, who was enthusiastically shaking a tube of sequins like it was a maraca. "I'm reasonably confident my cleaning lady has seen worse," Olivia said, holding up a star-shaped foam cutout. "Besides, Penny's loving this." From the other end of the table, Penny was directing Parker like a tiny general. "No, the sparkles go on the edges. You have to make it look magic." Zane leaned back in his chair. "They're going to stage a glitter revolution one day." "I'll surrender immediately," Olivia said, brushing a gold fleck off her cheek. "They're too powerful." Zane watched her for a moment. There was something different about her tonight. The perfection was still there, the fitted ivory blouse, the sleek bun, but her earrings didn't match, and she'd forgotten to remove a tiny sticker shaped like a dolphin from her wrist. It made her look real. "You always this relaxed during a hostile arts and crafts takeover?" he asked. She looked up, smile curving without effort. "Only when I'm not the one in charge." "That doesn't happen often, does it?" Less than I'd like. He nodded slowly. Must be strange. Running an empire by day, then coming home and trying to remember where the glitter glue is. It's not strange, she said, glancing toward the kids. It's the only part that feels like mine. Zane folded his arms on the table. That sounds like something someone only says when they're exhausted. I'm managing, she said quietly, not quite meeting his eyes. Managing isn't the same as living. She laughed once, dry and low. You sound like my sister. Is she also annoyingly observant? She's a therapist. So. Yes. The moment stretched, her gaze settling on his face. You ever feel like you're playing two people at once? Zane didn't answer right away. He glanced at Parker, who was now gluing googly eyes onto a pipe cleaner. Every day. There's who I was supposed to be. And then there's who he needs me to be. Her voice dropped. And which one wins? The one who makes sure there's dinner on the table. He looked back at her. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. Olivia looked down at her hands. I don't think I remember the last time I was honest with myself. Zane didn't push. She sat with that thought for a while, the hum of the city beyond the glass serving as the only background. Eventually, Penny yawned dramatically and collapsed against Olivia's side. I'm finished. This is the best crown ever. Zane stood, brushing off his jeans. We should probably head out. Bedtime is a battlefield. Olivia stood too, gently lifting Penny. I'll grab her pajamas. You can put Parker's shoes on. Zane nodded and turned to help his son, who was now trying to balance a glue stick on his nose. By the time Olivia returned, Penny was already asleep against her shoulder, and Parker was blinking slowly, his energy finally crashing. I'll call a car for you, she said, adjusting Penny in her arms. I can grab the subway. You're not taking two kids on a train at night, she said, her tone final. Zane raised a brow. You always this bossy? I call it effective delegation. He followed her into the private elevator, Parker leaning against his leg, half asleep. When the doors closed, Olivia hesitated. Zane. He looked at her. Would you ever consider? She hesitated a moment, searching for the right words. Would you come with me to a fundraiser next week? It's a seated dinner, formal, but I could really use someone who doesn't care about networking. You want me as your plus one? I want you there because you're the only person I've met in a long time who doesn't ask what I can do for them. Zane studied her face, the flicker of vulnerability that hadn't been there before. What's the dress code? He asked finally. Black tie. He exhaled. I don't even own a tie. I'll take care of that. He met her eyes. You sure you want to bring the guy who wears flannel to a billion-dollar gala? Olivia tilted her head slightly. Maybe it's time someone did. The car arrived on the curb minutes later, sleek and black, the kind that didn't have a visible logo. She helped him get the kid settled, then stepped back. You'll come? She asked. I'll be there, he said. She nodded, lips parting like she wanted to say more, then stopped herself. Zane rolled the window down as the car pulled away. Hey, Olivia. She looked up, hand on her hip. Thanks for letting us wreck your dining room. I liked it better with glitter anyway. He watched her disappear into the building, a strange feeling tightening in his chest. He hadn't expected this. And he definitely hadn't expected to want more. Zane adjusted the black bow tie again, frowning at his reflection in the mirror. He looked like someone else, someone who didn't spend his mornings chasing a 4-year-old around playgrounds or fixing leaky faucets while making grilled cheese. The tuxedo fit perfectly, tailored to his frame thanks to Olivia's quiet insistence and her assistant's alarming efficiency. You look like James Bond, Parker announced from the bathroom doorway, his pajamas covered in cartoon dinosaurs and cereal crumbs. Zane turned. Bond has better hair. You should bring home cake, Parker said, clearly in deep negotiation mode. Big cake. Chocolate. I'll see what I can do. Nora, their babysitter, appeared behind him. We'll be fine. Go before you're late. And yes, I'll make sure he brushes his teeth. Twice. Zane grabbed the cufflinks sitting on the dresser, slipped them on, and gave Parker a quick high five. Be good. The car waiting outside was the kind that didn't make noise when it pulled up, sleek, matte black, and probably worth more than his apartment. The driver opened the door with a nod, and Zane climbed in, the scent of leather and something expensive filling the interior. He found Olivia already inside, draped in a midnight blue gown that hugged her like it had been made just for her. Her hair was pinned up, a few strands falling loose around her face. She looked over as he settled beside her, eyes scanning him from collar to shoes. You clean up better than anyone has a right to, she said, her tone teasing but quiet. I was about to say the same thing, but I think you already knew. Her lips curved slightly, but there was tension behind her eyes, something tight, almost masked. He noticed the way she kept adjusting the ring on her index finger, a small tell. Big event, he asked. Annual gala for the foundation. Everyone will be there. Investors, board members, politicians, donors. People who like to hear themselves talk. Sounds exhausting. That's because it is. She glanced at him. But you're here, so maybe it won't be. The entrance to the ballroom was flanked with tall columns wrapped in white orchids, and a string quartet played beneath a chandelier that looked like it could bankrupt a small country. Olivia led them through the crowd with ease, her hand brushing his arm just once as they moved. I need to introduce you to someone, she said as they stopped near a cluster of sharply dressed men and women. Zane, this is Victor Hale. He's on the board. Victor extended a hand, his smile practiced. So this is the man I've been hearing about. Zane shook it firmly. Not sure what you've heard, but I deny all of it. Victor laughed, but Olivia's eyes flicked sideways, measuring. Zane caught it. You've got them all watching you, he murmured once the others drifted away. They always watch, she said. They want to know what kind of decisions I'll make. Who I'll make them with. And bringing me here, what does that say? That I'm not afraid to do what's unexpected. They moved toward their table, where name cards were placed beside polished glassware. When Zane pulled out her chair, she paused, lips parting slightly, as if surprised by the gesture. Didn't realize chivalry still existed, she said. I have my moments. Dinner passed in a blur of conversation and speeches, but Zane kept his attention on Olivia. She laughed when appropriate, nodded at the right times, but her hand stayed clenched around her napkin under the table. No one else seemed to notice it, but he did. When the orchestra began playing a slow, sweeping waltz, couples drifted to the floor. Olivia stood slowly, looking at him. Dance with me? I can't promise I won't step on your feet. I'll take the risk. They moved to the edge of the floor, her hand finding his shoulder, his on her waist. She was warm through the fabric, and close enough that her perfume wrapped around him something soft, unfamiliar, and expensive. You're doing better than half the men here, she said after a moment. That's a low bar. She laughed under her breath, then grew quiet. I spent so long building everything. Every step was calculated. Every relationship. Strategic. I forgot what it was like to just be with someone who doesn't want anything from me. Zane met her eyes. I don't need anything from you, Olivia. But I do want to be here. That's more than most. The music shifted seamlessly into something slower, and she didn't move away. Her head tilted, resting lightly against his shoulder. He hesitated, then spoke into her hair. You don't have to do this alone. You know that, right? She didn't answer at first. Then, softly, I don't know how to let someone in without losing everything I've built. Maybe it's not about holding on to all of it, he said. Maybe it's about finding what's worth keeping. She pulled back just enough to look at him, her expression unreadable. But something flickered there, something fragile and real. I wasn't expecting you, she said. I wasn't expecting any of this. The music ended, but they didn't move. Around them, the room kept spinning, laughter rising like bubbles in champagne flutes. But Zane only saw her. He stepped back slightly, just enough to read her face. You okay? I don't know, she said. But I want to be. Later, as they stood near the exit waiting for her car, Olivia reached for his hand. Not for show. Not for balance. Just because. And Zane, who had spent so many years walking alone, didn't hesitate to hold it. As the car pulled away into the night, he glanced at her resting quietly beside him, head tilted against the glass, eyes closed. He didn't know exactly where this was going, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he had to figure everything out. He just had to show up. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Zane pushed open the glass door of the boutique, the quiet chime overhead barely audible above the low hum of classical music echoing through the expansive space. He hadn't meant to end up here, but after the gala, after the dancing, after Olivia's hand in his, after the way she'd looked at him like she was finally letting herself breathe, it felt impossible to go back to normal. He ran a hand through his damp hair and glanced around. Marble floors. Pedestals with handbags that probably had security tags more valuable than his truck. He was clearly out of place, but he didn't care. He pointed to a display case near the back. That one, he said to the attendant, a man in a tailored suit who blinked once before nodding. Wrap it, please. And add a note. He paused, the words already clear in his head. Later that evening, he stepped into the hallway of Olivia's building, the gift in hand. Not flashy. Not loud. Just something he hoped she'd understand. He pressed the buzzer. When she opened the door, she was barefoot, hair damp from a shower, wearing a robe that looked almost too soft to be real. She blinked at him, surprised. I didn't know you were coming, she said. I know, he said, lifting the wrapped box. I needed to give you this. She stepped aside, letting him in. The kids are with my sister for the weekend. Penny wanted to play with her cousins. It's the first night I've had to myself in weeks. Then I'll keep it short. He handed her the box. She sat on the arm of her couch and peeled the paper back carefully. Inside was a small leather-bound journal, the kind with thick pages and a stitched spine. Tucked inside the first page was a short note, written in his clean, careful handwriting. For the thoughts you don't say out loud. She looked up at him, her voice low. Why this? Because I know what it's like to have 1,000 things in your head and no space to put them. You don't owe anyone your thoughts, Olivia. But you deserve somewhere to put them. She didn't speak for a long time. Just ran her fingers over the cover. Then, without a word, she stood and walked over to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her forehead against his chest. I've never had someone see me like you do, she whispered. Zane held her tighter. Maybe you've been looking at people who were never really trying. The weekend passed in a quiet rhythm. Olivia invited him and Parker to stay for brunch the next day, and instead of the usual polished calm, she burned the eggs and laughed when flour exploded across the counter. Zane made pancakes. The kids built a fort out of couch cushions in the living room. No one answered their phones. By Sunday evening, Olivia sat on the floor, hair falling into her eyes as she helped Penny thread beads onto a string. Zane leaned against the doorway, watching the two of them, something in his chest tightening. He walked over and crouched beside her. You ever think about what it would be like if this wasn't just weekends? Olivia looked at him, her expression unreadable. You mean if this was permanent? I mean if this was life. Not borrowed time. She hesitated. I don't know if I know how to do permanent. I've always been the one who leaves. Or who gets left. Zane reached for her hand. Then let's choose something else. Something different. The next afternoon, Olivia stood at the window of the boardroom, the city sprawling beneath her. Her assistant tapped in lightly, holding up an envelope. This was just delivered. No sender name. Olivia opened it. Inside was a single photo, Parker and Penny sitting together on a bench, both wearing paper crowns, mid-laugh. Behind it, a note in that same clean handwriting. Let's build something real. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she dropped her phone on the desk, grabbed her coat, and walked out of the building without a word. She found him at the park. Zane was sitting on the bench, Parker beside him, both of them eating ice cream. Penny was running in circles, her laughter cutting through the late afternoon haze. When he looked up and saw her, he stood slowly. She walked straight to him and kissed him. In front of the kids. In front of the world. It wasn't soft or shy. It was a kiss full of decisions already made. When she pulled back, her voice was clear. I want this. All of it. You. Parker. The mess. The quiet. The moments that aren't curated or perfect. Zane cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. Then let's stop waiting. That weekend, they stood in the backyard of Olivia's childhood home. Penny tossed flower petals with Parker beside her, both of them grinning like they'd been in on the plan all along. Zane wore a navy suit, no tie, barefoot in the grass. Olivia wore a tea-length dress, simple and bright, her hair down. They said their vows under the warm light of sunset, surrounded by a tight circle of people who mattered. No headlines. No cameras. Just them. Afterward, Zane pulled her close during the first dance, whispering into her ear. Still can't believe I found you because of a lost kid and a glitter crown. Olivia laughed, eyes bright. You didn't find me. You saw me. And when Parker and Penny ran between their legs moments later, giggling and wild, Zane just grinned and reached for both their hands and hers. Because this time, no one was lost. They were home. The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains in their new house just outside the city, casting soft light across the hardwood floors and the scattered toys of two very imaginative children. Olivia stood barefoot in the kitchen, her hair loosely braided down her back, stirring a pot of oatmeal while humming under her breath. Zane entered with Parker perched on his hip, the boy's arms wrapped around his father's neck. He says he wants sprinkles in his oatmeal, Zane said, eyebrows raised. Olivia turned slightly. Sprinkles are for birthdays. Parker tilted his head. But it's Tuesday. Exactly, she said, handing Zane 2 bowls. We celebrate Tuesdays with bananas and cinnamon. Parker sighed dramatically, but accepted his bowl. Fine. But Friday better have chocolate chips. Zane leaned in and kissed Olivia's cheek. You're teaching him compromise. I'm impressed. I'm teaching him how to survive in a house that doesn't run on sugar and chaos. I ran on chaos just fine before I met you. She handed him a spoon without looking. And now? Now I run on coffee and you. She turned toward him fully, her eyes warm but alert. You're flirting before caffeine. Dangerous move. I live dangerously. Penny came bounding down the stairs, her hair a tangle of curls, wearing mismatched socks and a glittery sweater. I had a dream that the living room turned into a pirate ship. Olivia handed her a bowl. Did it sink? Nope. Daddy Zane had a sword, and Mommy was the captain. Zane raised a brow. Captain, huh? I like the sound of that, Olivia said, sitting beside him at the table. Captain Jordan. Has a ring to it. The 4 of them sat around the table messy, loud, and full of small negotiations over toppings and napkins. There was no orchestra playing, no skyline view, no boardroom walls. Just a kitchen filled with the chaos of family. After breakfast, Zane took Parker outside to help him build a lopsided fort out of cardboard boxes while Penny insisted Olivia watch her performance a full ballet routine she choreographed to a song she made up on the spot. Later that afternoon, when both kids were down for quiet time, Olivia pulled Zane out onto the back porch. The air was crisp, the garden still new and half-planted. She leaned against the railing, watching the wind move through the trees. "You remember when I told you I didn't know how to do permanent?" she said. "I do. I was wrong. I didn't know how to do lonely. Not anymore." Zane stepped behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. "I never wanted to fix you. I just wanted to stand next to you while you figured out what you needed." "I needed this," she said, her voice steady. "Not the house. Not the title. Just the quiet. The space to be real. To mess up. To be loved anyway." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You mess up beautifully." She turned around, looping her arms around his neck. "You know, I never asked you the one thing people always ask in these situations." "What's that? What do you want?" Zane leaned in, brushing his lips against hers. "I already have it." She kissed him back slowly, like she had all the time in the world. Because she did now. There was no deadline, no looming meeting, no phone vibrating with a dozen emergencies. Just the sound of wind and the distant, muffled laughter of two small children in the next room. That evening, they hosted a small dinner in their backyard. Olivia's sister came with her kids, and Nora dropped by with a homemade pie. There were folding chairs, strings of warm lights overhead, and mismatched plates that made Parker giggle every time someone got the one with the dancing frog on it. At one point, Olivia stood beside Zane, their hands naturally intertwining. Her sister nudged her gently. "I've never seen you this settled," she said. "I've never felt this rooted," Olivia replied. Later that night, after the dishes had been washed, the kids tucked in, and the house had settled into stillness, Olivia climbed into bed beside Zane, curling against his side. "I used to think love had to be earned," she murmured. "That it came with conditions. Expectations." "And now?" he asked, running his fingers lightly through her hair. "Now I know it's a choice. One we keep making. Every day." He kissed her shoulder. "Then I'll keep choosing you. Every single one of them." She turned to face him, eyes soft. "I love you." He smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need an audience. "I love you more." The next morning, Olivia stepped into her home office. The room was still half-finished, books stacked in corners, artwork leaning against walls, but the desk was clear, the air light. She sat down and opened the leather-bound journal Zane had given her months ago, flipping past the first few pages of thoughts she'd scribbled late at night, some of them messy, some of them raw, all of them hers. She picked up her pen and began to write. "Today, I am not alone." Across the hall, Zane was laughing with Parker over spilled cereal, and Penny was telling Nora a story that involved a dragon and a stolen backpack. The house was loud. Imperfect. Real. And it was hers. All of it. They'd built something together. Not out of convenience. Not out of obligation. But out of love. And it was permanent.